I never imagined my life would boil down to this moment. Standing in a room full of people who don't see me, whose gratitude never reaches my ears. And yet, I'm the one holding everything together. I'm Kate Scott, 31 years old, a critical care nurse with 8 years of experience, and the quiet backbone of my family. While my days are filled with the urgent rhythm of monitors and the hushed whispers of hospital wards, my nights belong to unpaid bills, missed calls from my father, and the invisible weight of responsibility. Last month, when the electricity was about to be cut and the mortgage payment was overdue, I transferred money from my savings without telling a soul. No thank you, no acknowledgement. Just another crisis quietly averted. Haley, my younger sister by 2 years, makes sure I don't forget my place. She floats through the house like she owns it. Charming, effortless, always the center of Dad's attention. I watch her manipulate conversations, twisting family gatherings to her advantage, while I fade into the background. The tension is always there, like a low hum beneath our interactions. But I tell myself it's just a rough patch. Maybe it's normal sibling rivalry. Maybe things will change. I hold on to that hope, even as my stomach tightens when I catch a sideways glance from Haley, or the way Dad's eyes light up when she speaks, but glaze over when I try to share something. What they don't know, what I haven't dared to say aloud, is that the house is in my name. I carry that secret like a hidden weapon, proof of my value, but it's a power I've never wielded. Instead, I keep giving, hoping one day they'll see me. Memories from my teenage years still burn quietly beneath my skin, reminding me how deeply this favoritism runs. I remember my 16th birthday like it was yesterday. Dad's enthusiasm poured into Haley with lavish gifts and warm smiles. She got the necklace she'd been dreaming about. I got a simple card and a polite, "Happy birthday." The difference wasn't lost on me. Haley was the golden child, shimmering with charm and effortless grace, always praised for her looks, her social ease. I was the quiet helper, the responsible one who stayed in the background, mopping up the emotional messes no one else wanted to handle. Dad never stood up for me. When I tried to voice my hurt, he'd brush it off with a weary, "That's just how family is," as if that settled everything. One moment that still stings is when Haley lied about her school grades, saying she'd done better than she really had. Dad excused her, waving it away as a harmless fib, but when I made a far smaller mistake, missed a curfew by 10 minutes, I was met with stern lectures and grounded weekends. That moment carved a silent line between us, one I tried to bridge with hard work and loyalty. I told myself that if I just kept doing the right thing, if I stayed the steady rock, Dad's approval would come. It never did. Those early wounds made me quieter, more cautious, holding back my true feelings so I wouldn't be dismissed again. The sacrifices I've made are more than just emotional. They're tangible, costly. Over the past 5 years, I've poured more than $150,000 into this family's survival. Mortgage payments, utilities, medical bills. When Dad was short, or Haley's expenses piled up, I stepped in without hesitation. I canceled 2 vacations I desperately needed and watched promotions slip through my fingers because I was working overtime caring for ailing relatives instead of networking. Daniel, my husband, often asks me why I let my family take advantage like this. He sees it, even if they don't. "You're not their bank," he says gently, but he doesn't push me to stop. He supports me quietly, knowing I'm not ready to walk away. Lisa, our older sister, notices too, but she stays neutral, carefully balancing her distance. What no one knows is that the family home, the place where these dramas unfold, is legally mine. I keep that fact locked away, a quiet assurance that I have some control, even if it doesn't change how they treat me. I cling to the hope that one day, my sacrifices will be recognized not just in dollars and deeds, but in respect and love. For now, I'm the silent guardian, the invisible pillar holding up a house that feels more like a cage. The first time Haley humiliated me in front of everyone, I felt the sting like a slap across my face. It was at a family dinner celebrating her promotion, an event I should have been proud of her for. Instead, Haley turned the spotlight on me with a cutting joke. "Kate's always the nurse, saving everyone but can't save herself from being boring." The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. Some cousins laughed nervously, others quickly looked away. I felt my chest tighten. The familiar ache of being invisible sharpened into something raw. My heart thudded painfully as I swallowed the urge to snap back. I told myself she was just stressed, maybe jealous, trying to deflect her own insecurities. I forced a small smile and excused myself to the kitchen, needing air, needing distance. I stood there, hands gripping the counter, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence as I tried to steady my breathing. It was a small act of resistance, walking away instead of engaging. But inside, I fought to keep the walls of dignity intact. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Yet, as I washed my hands, feeling the cold water sluice over my skin, a slow, creeping doubt began to take root. Maybe I wasn't just being oversensitive. Maybe this time, the damage was deeper than I wanted to admit. But for now, I swallowed that thought and returned to the table, still hoping this was just a rough patch that would pass. The moment I started pulling back, even just a little, Haley seemed to sense it immediately. It was like she sniffed out weakness and pounced on it. Suddenly, whispers began swirling around family gatherings, quiet, casual remarks from cousins and aunts I barely spoke to. "Kate's so controlling," they said, "always trying to manage everything. She's too sensitive about nothing." The words stung, but worse was how they were delivered, as if they were facts everyone agreed on. My phone buzzed with texts from distant relatives I barely see, urging me to lighten up or stop making a big deal out of nothing. The isolation grew thick and heavy, pressing down on me like the weight of 1,000 invisible hands pushing me away. What hurt most was Dad's reaction. When I finally confronted him, pleading for some sense of fairness, he sighed as if I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Kate, you've always been too sensitive," he said, his voice tired and dismissive. "Haley's just being herself. You need to accept that." Those words echoed in my mind, twisting something inside me. Was I really the problem? Was my perception distorted by my own stubborn pride? I tried to hold on to my truth, but the doubt crept in like a shadow at dusk. I found myself questioning every interaction, wondering if I had misunderstood everything, if I was truly the difficult one. But even as the voices grew louder, a small, stubborn part of me refused to surrender. I couldn't just disappear into the background forever. I spent nights lying awake, hearing the soft creaks of the house settling around me, my thoughts spiraling. The family I once believed in felt more like a storm I couldn't weather. I caught myself flinching at the mention of my name, expecting criticism or a cutting remark. At work, I felt the distance grow too. Some colleagues whispered behind my back, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. I missed the warmth I used to feel in family moments, the laughter that masked the tension. But I knew if I gave in, if I stopped standing firm, I'd lose myself completely. So I clenched my fists and tried to find strength in the quiet spaces between the chaos. Still, when Haley passed me in the hallway, her gaze cold and triumphant, I forced myself not to respond. I told myself this was a test, that my dignity mattered more than any petty battle she waged. Yet, beneath my calm, my heart ached for the sister I once thought I knew, the one who laughed with me, shared secrets, and didn't make me feel invisible. That sister was gone, replaced by someone who wielded charm like a weapon, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a relationship unraveling before my eyes. Hoping for some resolution, I arranged a meeting with Haley and Dad, determined to lay everything out calmly and clearly. Lisa agreed to mediate, her neutral presence a slight balm to my nerves. Sitting across from them in the quiet living room, I took a deep breath, steadying my voice as I spoke. "I've been supporting this family in ways no one acknowledges," I said, my words measured but firm. "I'm tired of feeling invisible and dismissed. I just want us to find a way to respect each other." I looked at Haley, hoping for a flicker of understanding, but instead, tears welled in her eyes, tears I knew were not sincere. "You think you're better than me," she accused, voice sharp despite the feigned vulnerability. "You always have to be the hero, the perfect one. It's suffocating." Dad nodded in agreement, his expression tired but resolute. "Kate, you need to let it go. For the sake of this family, stop fighting every little thing." Lisa watched silently, her face unreadable, offering no comfort. The room closed in on me, and I realized that my attempt at peace had only deepened the divide. I left the meeting with my throat tight and my heart heavier, understanding that words alone wouldn't heal these wounds. After that, the distance between Haley and me widened into a chasm impossible to cross with mere conversations. At a work-related charity event, something I'd looked forward to as a rare moment to breathe, Haley struck again. She cornered Daniel and a group of my friends, her voice loud and cruel, weaving a story that twisted truth into poison. Kate's charity work? Just an excuse to control everyone around her. She sneered, casting a dark shadow over the effort I'd poured my heart into. Then, with a cruel smile, she revealed details about my recent surgery, mocking my vulnerability as if it were some joke. I could feel Daniel's stunned silence, the flicker of shock in his eyes striking me deeper than any public humiliation. My friends shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, others looking away, unsure how to respond. The air felt thick and suffocating, as if all the years of quiet sacrifice were suddenly erased in that moment. I stood frozen, heat flushing my face, the sting of betrayal sharp and clear. It was worse than I imagined. Haley wasn't just reckless. She was purposeful, aiming to dismantle everything I had quietly built. The damage wasn't just emotional now. It was tangible, seeping into my professional life and social circles, fracturing the fragile trust I'd struggled to maintain. Despite this, I tried once more, holding onto a thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find common ground. When Haley mentioned her financial troubles, another problem I hadn't chosen to get involved in, I offered help. It was a tentative olive branch, a way to show I still wanted peace, still wanted to mend what was broken. I told her honestly, I just want respect and honesty between us. That's what I need. But her response was colder than I expected. She laughed, twisting my offer into an accusation. "You think you can buy my love? That's pathetic." Then, without a hint of empathy, she dismissed my surgery struggle as drama, as if my pain was something to mock publicly. That moment shattered the fragile hope I'd clung to. I realized then that I had done everything I could, opened my heart, offered support, laid my needs bare, and still, Haley rejected every attempt at reconciliation. Her cruelty was not a momentary lapse. It was a deliberate wall she erected between us. I stood there, breath catching in my chest, the cold weight of rejection settling over me like a winter chill. The sister I once longed to connect with had disappeared entirely, replaced by someone I barely recognized, and someone I could no longer reach. The more I tried to hold everything together, the more it felt like I was shattering into pieces no one seemed to notice. Haley's relentless whispers and subtle digs had found fertile ground. Her venom had seeped into the family's veins, poisoning their view of me. Even Lisa, who once stood as a quiet buffer between us, began to pull away. It wasn't outright hostility, but a cautious distance, as if she were too tired to carry the weight of our fractured family any longer. "Kate, I'm just exhausted," she said one evening, voice strained. "Family drama. It never ends. Sometimes you have to step back to survive." Her words cut deeper than she realized. Was I the cause of this exhaustion? The one wearing everyone thin? I wrestled with that possibility in the small hours, the silence of my bedroom suffocating. Daniel was the only steady beacon in the storm. His presence was a balm, but even he couldn't fill the widening void left by those who were supposed to stand by me. When I caught myself speaking less at family dinners, retreating into shadows, his hand would find mine beneath the table, grounding me. "You're not alone," he'd whisper gently, but I could hear the worry in his voice, the fear that I was sinking too deep. I stared at my reflection one night, drained and pale, the lines of stress etching themselves across my face. Maybe I really am the problem, I admitted to the mirror. The thought twisted tight in my chest, a bitter knot of doubt and exhaustion. I wanted to scream, to run away from this suffocating labyrinth of resentment and neglect, but a faint ember of resolve flickered stubbornly within me. I wasn't ready to give up entirely. Not yet. The house felt empty even when it was full. Voices that once felt like home now echoed with accusations and cold judgment. I caught snippets of conversations. Kate's overreacting again. She's always so controlling. And each word was a dagger twisting deeper into my confidence. I questioned every gesture, every smile, wondering if I had misread the signs all along. Was I too sensitive? Was my need for fairness just unreasonable? The loneliness was suffocating, a thick fog that clung to my skin and seeped into my bones. Sleep became elusive, the night filled with restless thoughts and the relentless replay of every hurtful moment. Yet, beneath the crushing weight of isolation, something inside me hardened, a quiet refusal to vanish without a trace. One afternoon, as I sat alone in the living room, the silence pressing down like a physical force, I reached out to Dad one last time. His response was a tired sigh, and a dismissal that echoed the years of neglect. "Kate, you have to accept things as they are. Haley's part of this family and so is her husband. They come first." The words were a slap disguised as advice, a confirmation that my place was always secondary. I felt the walls closing in, the familiar ache of invisibility sharp and relentless. But this time, instead of breaking, I folded the pain inward, clutching it close as a secret fuel. I was alone, yes, but I still had myself. And somehow, that had to be enough. The night of my surgery, everything I thought I knew about family care and support crumbled into dust. Blood still fresh beneath my skin, I waited weak and shivering in the hospital bed, hoping to see one familiar face. But Robert's absence was a cruel echo of years of neglect. When I finally managed to call him, his voice was indifferent on the other end. "I can't. Haley's husband's waiting. He's more important," he said flatly, and the words felt like a punch to the gut. I was supposed to be family, yet I was left to fend for myself, bleeding and broken. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat, refusing to cry in front of the nurses bustling around me. When Daniel finally arrived, his eyes were filled with a mix of guilt and helplessness. He was too late, and so was everyone else. The ride home in an Uber was a blur of pain and cold detachment. The hum of the tires on the pavement was the only sound cutting through the fog in my mind. Strangers' voices floated in and out of focus as I stared at the ceiling of the car, feeling smaller than I ever had. The sterile hospital lights, the antiseptic smell, the distant beeping of monitors, none of it mattered now. What mattered was the hollow space where my family's support should have been. In that moment, something inside me cracked, not with the explosive fury I had imagined, but a cold, numbing clarity. The truth I'd been avoiding for so long settled like ice in my veins. They valued Haley and her husband more than me, more than my pain, more than my life. Hope didn't just flicker out that night. It died, leaving behind a steely resolve that would not be ignored. Back home, in the suffocating quiet of my room, I was left alone with the debris of shattered trust. The years of sacrifice, of holding the family together with invisible threads, seemed suddenly meaningless. I traced the memories like scars. Every time I'd put others first, every humiliation endured in silence, every moment I'd swallowed my own needs for the sake of peace. And through the haze of hurt, a slow-burning anger began to kindle. This wasn't just sadness or disappointment anymore. It was a fierce, burning refusal to be invisible, to be dismissed as the problem. "This has always been this way," I finally admitted aloud, the words tasting bitter but honest. The veil lifted, revealing patterns I had refused to see, the favoritism, the manipulation, the silent alliances against me. For the first time, I acknowledged something that had been quietly building beneath the surface, my own power. The house was mine, legally and unequivocally. Every payment, every bill covered, every financial strain borne in silence was documented, a record of my unseen strength. This was my leverage, my secret weapon against the tide of neglect. I clenched my fists, feeling the promise of control settle in my bones. "Never again," I whispered fiercely. Never again would I allow myself to be erased, silenced, or shamed. This was a turning point, not just emotionally, but strategically. I was done being the family's invisible caretaker. It was time to reclaim my place, on my own terms. That evening, I sat with Daniel in the quiet of our living room, the weight of everything hanging heavily between us. I laid out my decision in clear, measured tones, surprising even myself with the calm determination in my voice. "I'm going to do a full financial audit," I told him, watching for any sign of hesitation. "I need to show the family exactly what I've done, what I've carried all these years." Daniel's brow furrowed with concern, his hands tightening around mine. "Kate, I support you, but it's going to be hard. Emotionally, and maybe worse." I nodded, grateful for his steady presence but resolute in my choice. The target was clear: Haley. Her manipulations had cost me too much. It was time to expose the truth. We talked late into the night, outlining steps, gathering documents, and planning how to approach the family without losing myself in the process. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, not the naive kind that once blinded me, but a quiet, fierce certainty. I was no longer a silent victim but a strategist, grounded in facts and fueled by justice. The path ahead was uncertain and steep, but for now, the hardest step had been taken. I had chosen to fight back. Daniel squeezed my hand, his voice low but steady. "We'll do this together." And in that moment, I believed we truly would. I spent hours compiling a detailed inventory of every way the family depended on me financially. Mortgage payments, utility bills, car insurance, groceries, medical expenses. I tallied them all, the sum staggering. Over 5 years, I had quietly poured nearly $150,000 into keeping this household afloat, often covering unexpected doctor visits and prescriptions without a word. The numbers lay bare, undeniable. Sitting at my kitchen table, I pulled out years of bank statements, credit card bills, and contracts, my fingers tracing the faded ink and digital records. I needed clarity, a full picture. Daniel helped me set up a meeting with a trusted accountant. Together, we combed through joint accounts, tracing patterns I hadn't fully seen before. There were frequent withdrawals, small enough to seem innocent but consistent, from Haley's name, often right after family dinners or weekends. I realized she had been quietly siphoning funds more than I suspected, masking her spending behind vague explanations. Even more troubling was Dad's passive acceptance. He never questioned the draining balances, even as my contributions kept piling up. It was painfully clear. I was the backbone holding this fragile structure together, while they treated it like a given. The weight of this truth settled heavily on my chest. "They need me more than I need them," I whispered to myself one evening, staring at the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop. It wasn't just money. It was years of unseen labor, emotional exhaustion, and silent sacrifice. I began documenting everything meticulously, scanning receipts, annotating dates, and creating summaries. Every transaction was a testament to my invisible endurance. It was the groundwork for the change I knew had to come, even if it terrified me to confront the family with it. But I couldn't keep living in the shadows of their indifference anymore. The deeper I dug, the sharper the realization that this was not just about money. It was about control, respect, and reclaiming my voice. I printed out the document folders, organized them in neat binders, and locked them in my study drawer. Holding those binders, I felt a dangerous mix of vulnerability and power. The evidence was undeniable. I was ready to face the fallout. But first, I needed to prepare, carefully, silently, and strategically. The battle lines were drawn, even if they didn't yet know it. Every detail mattered, from bank transfers to the passive complicity lurking in Dad's silence. I had to be precise. This wasn't just a list of debts and payments, it was my shield and my weapon. Holding this evidence, I finally allowed myself the faintest flicker of hope that the truth could be a catalyst for change, even if that change came wrapped in conflict. With the binders locked away, I set about quietly changing passwords on every joint account and shared bill. Each new password was a small act of reclaiming control, a silent message I wasn't going to be the family's invisible wallet anymore. I consulted with a lawyer, discussing property rights and financial protocols. The legal side was a tangled web, but I was determined to navigate it with care. I wanted to ensure that everything was airtight before making any moves. The lawyer's calm professionalism gave me a strange sense of reassurance, a reminder that I wasn't powerless. Despite the storm gathering inside me, I maintained a calm facade during family gatherings. I smiled, nodded politely, and played the role of the composed sister, the dutiful daughter. No one suspected the quiet shift underneath. Haley continued her passive-aggressive barbs, and Dad's tired eyes held the same weary indifference, but I met their coldness with steady resolve. The house echoed with the usual undercurrents of tension, but I was patient. I knew the calm before the storm was necessary. Rushing now would only shatter the fragile equilibrium and give them room to dismiss or manipulate the truth again. I spent evenings alone, securing financial documents, scanning receipts, and backing up digital files. Every detail was cataloged, every contract reviewed. It was exhausting work, but it grounded me. The weight of responsibility I had carried for so long now felt like a mantle I was finally ready to wear openly. The quiet moments before sleep were filled with thoughts of justice, not vengeance, but a reckoning that had been overdue. I imagined how the family might react, but I pushed those fears aside. For now, silence and preparation were my allies. At one point, Haley shot me a curious glance during dinner, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes, but I simply smiled and changed the topic. Inside, my heart raced with the knowledge that beneath our fragile civility, everything was shifting. I could almost taste the tension, like static electricity in the air, but I held my peace. The time to act wasn't now. Patience was my weapon. I would strike only when the moment was right, when the foundation they took for granted could no longer hold. As I reviewed the family's financial records late one night, a new and chilling discovery surfaced. Buried deep in the paperwork was a series of falsified documents and unauthorized credit lines tied to Haley, revealing a secret debt exceeding $200,000. My breath caught. The room suddenly too hot despite the cool night air. This wasn't just irresponsible spending. It was a hidden financial time bomb. The scale of her deception was staggering, and it explained so much. Her desperation, her manipulative demands, the constant excuses. I sat back, hands trembling slightly as I stared at the numbers and forged signatures. How had this gone unnoticed for so long? The implications were terrifying. If this debt wasn't addressed, it could drag the entire family into ruin. The realization tightened my chest with urgency and a fierce resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. The whole family's future was at stake, and Haley's reckless choices threatened to destroy everything. I felt a new clarity wash over me. This was no longer just a personal fight. It was a battle for survival. The sense of betrayal cut deeper than ever. Haley's manipulations had been reckless, but this secret financial burden was a deliberate gamble, one that endangered all of us. My mind raced with questions, anger simmering beneath the surface. How could she have done this without anyone noticing? Dad's passivity suddenly felt like negligence. The family's blind trust had enabled this deceit. I knew now that exposing this truth was not only justified, but necessary. The moral weight of the situation steeled my nerves. I gathered the documents, printed copies, and backed them up securely. Daniel was with me as I shared the discovery, his face mirroring my shock and concern. "This changes everything," he said quietly, gripping my hand. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The urgency was clear, but my approach had to be measured. I had to prepare for the inevitable fallout carefully, ensuring I had every fact and legal support at my side. The truth was a powerful weapon, but it needed to be wielded with precision. The night stretched on as I pieced together the full picture. The extent of Haley's secret debts lined up like a trail of breadcrumbs through years of family financials. The magnitude of her recklessness pulled me deeper into resolve. There was no turning back now. This discovery was the turning point I'd needed, one that justified the audit and confrontation I had planned. The family's future, and my own dignity, depended on it. The first moves were quiet, but deliberate. I paused my mortgage contributions without announcement, freezing payments on certain accounts linked to Haley. It was a calculated risk, soft enough that the family might notice rising bills, but not yet suspect my full intent. Within days, Overdue notices began arriving, quietly piling up on the kitchen counter. Haley's usual carefree demeanor faltered, replaced by a thin veneer of anxiety. I watched as the cracks started to show in her confident facade. Haley faced mounting pressure from creditors for the first time. Calls went unanswered, and the tone of her texts became sharp and defensive. I heard her pacing late at night, the weight of consequences pressing down on her like a physical force. Dad mentioned missed payments casually, unaware of my role in tightening the financial reins. The family sensed the tension, but couldn't yet connect the dots. I kept my expression neutral, attending family dinners with the same calm I'd cultivated, a mask hiding the storm I'd set in motion. Daniel noticed the change in me. "You're stronger than I've ever seen," he said quietly one evening, squeezing my hand beneath the table. His pride and steady support were a balm, grounding me in the midst of chaos. I smiled softly, drawing strength from his faith. This was just the beginning, but already I felt a shift inside myself, a reclaiming of power and control long denied. I wasn't just a silent victim anymore. The house was thick with unspoken tension, but I remained composed, watching as the first consequences of my actions unfolded. The family's fragile balance was tipping, and I was ready to stand firm. The stage was set, and even if they didn't realize it yet, the reckoning had begun. I let the silence speak, knowing the ripples would grow louder with each passing day. My quiet revolution had started. The day of the family meeting felt heavy in the air, like a storm held just out of sight. I had arranged for Robert, Haley, and Lisa to meet at the house, insisting on a calm, civil space to lay everything bare. When we sat down, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of silence pressing down before I began. "I want to be clear. This isn't about blame or anger. It's about truth," I said, voice steady but edged with quiet authority. I laid the binders on the table, months of audits, receipts, bank statements, every number and date backed by hard evidence. One by one, I walked them through the payments I'd made, the expenses I'd covered without complaint. The sum was staggering. The room grew heavier with every page I turned. Then, with deliberate calm, I shifted to Haley's hidden debts, those secret credit lines, the forged signatures, the mounting bills. I watched as her confident mask cracked, confusion flickering in her eyes. "You can't deny these," I said, voice firm. The silence was deafening. Robert shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us, his usual passivity losing ground to the facts I presented. Lisa's mouth opened slightly, a flicker of surprise and shame crossing her features. The power dynamic that had defined us for years, Haley's manipulation and my quiet suffering, crumbled, replaced by a new reality: accountability. I set terms clearly. Financial transparency was non-negotiable. I would no longer be the invisible caretaker footing everyone's bills without respect or recognition. Debts had to be acknowledged and repaid. Haley's silence was the only response, her defenses shattered. In that room, I felt a rising certainty, a shift from victim to authority. The family's facade cracked, and for the first time, I saw my role as indispensable and valued, not invisible. It was the champagne moment of a long, quiet war. The aftermath was immediate. Haley's hidden debts unleashed a flood of creditor calls and legal threats that shattered the fragile veneer of our family's stability. She was forced to confront a reality she'd dodged for years, anxiety shadowing her every move. Robert tried to step in, attempting to mediate with his usual gentle diplomacy, but his passivity was ineffective against the tangible evidence and mounting pressure. Haley reached out to me, messages filled with desperation and pleas for help, but I held firm boundaries. I was no longer her safety net. Other family members, previously silent or complicit, began to question Haley's version of events, seeking my perspective. The carefully constructed stories she'd spun unraveled, exposing a deeper dysfunction that had been hidden beneath years of neglect and denial. I watched this unraveling with a controlled satisfaction, knowing that justice was unfolding not through anger or revenge, but through truth and accountability. The family's fragile equilibrium was gone, replaced by a painful but necessary reckoning that I finally helped bring to light. Despite the chaos, I remained composed. Haley's frantic attempts to regain control only exposed her further. The carrying weight of her debts changed everything. Her world was crumbling while mine steadied. Through it all, I kept my distance, maintaining the boundaries I set, not out of cruelty, but self-preservation. I was no longer the shadow in the background. I was the voice of reason and consequence. Watching the family face what they had ignored for so long, I felt a quiet relief. The truth was messy, but it was the only path forward. Haley's desperation deepened, her tactics growing more frantic and manipulative. She unleashed emotional blackmail, painting herself as the victim in social media posts, weaving a narrative designed to guilt and pressure me. Threats of legal action followed. Attempts to drag me into conflicts I refused to engage in. She even rallied extended family members, trying to sway their loyalty with half-truths and distorted facts. But as the evidence mounted, and the reality of her recklessness became undeniable, support for her dwindled. My lawyer advised me to remain resolute and not respond to provocations. I took that counsel seriously, knowing that any crack could be exploited. Some relatives reached out, apologizing quietly for doubting me, their remorse cautious yet genuine. I accepted their apologies with guarded grace, aware that rebuilding trust would be a slow, deliberate process. Haley's isolation grew, her confidence fractured by the walls closing in. Her once commanding presence faded into desperation and silence. Through it all, I stood firm, no longer the sister to be manipulated, but a woman claiming her dignity and peace. 6 months later, a profound peace settled over my life like a soft, steady light. Daniel and I had strengthened our bond, freed from the shadows of family drama that once threatened to consume us. I had established clear, firm boundaries with Haley and Robert, contact limited to respect, honesty, and accountability. The house I legally owned was no longer a battleground but a sanctuary. I didn't seek their approval anymore. I sought only my own peace. Haley faced ongoing consequences for her choices, but she no longer held the power to control or define me. Reflecting on the journey, I acknowledged the pain and the long years of invisibility, but I also embraced my new strength and clarity. I didn't miss what I never truly had: the false warmth of a family that disregarded me. Instead, I valued the quiet freedom I'd earned. "Peace is worth more than approval," I told Daniel one evening, the words settling like a balm over my soul. The future stretched out before me, uncertain but mine to shape, defined not by others' expectations, but by my own self-respect and resolve. For the first time, I looked forward with genuine hope.